Secret friends, unite!
Hey, Secret Friends. Welcome back to Oops, All Thunderdome, the main Secret Friends Unite show here on our network. This is episode number 569. This is, of course, our show where we snag a single topic and we dissect it between myself and one of my venerable co-hosts. In this case, I'm joined again, as I was last time, by my friend Andy from Norway. Hello, Andy.
Hi, Charlie.
How's it going on this lovely Sunday, even though it's 5? Are we 6 hours apart? 5 hours? You're in the future? Okay. Well, we're recording this at noon at my time. So you're at dinner time right now. So, but still plenty of time to talk about Spider-Man. We're continuing with our second segment of the Summer of Spider-Man, where we're getting ourselves prepared for Spider-Man Brand New Day, which will be out on July 31st around the globe, in talking about the Amazing Spider-Man from 2012. And as I learned in the pre-roll, we do have some variety of thoughts around this film. So this is going to be an interesting chat. But first and foremost, I do, as always, want to give some love and respect to the wonderful people over on our Secret Friends Unite Patreon at patreon.com/Secret Friends Unite. There's exclusive programming over there, including the just released new episode of A Bad Trip to the Movies with the Cardins, which is a show I do with my wife about a movie we didn't really care for. This exclusive show, and also The Facts Geek Life, our long-running show, where we break down a series and season and some episodes. That show is winding down, talking about Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica, which is a favorite of Peter and mine. All of our shows come out early on the Patreon, so if you're listening to this show, for example, Patreon's had it 2 days early on a Tuesday, so we'd love that to be you. Here's how it works. Your first week is free, and certainly you can even stay on board as a free member. That would be totally awesome. But if you do elect to stay on board, it's half off your first month, and then you stay on board for as little as $2 a month. So we would absolutely love to have you. There are hundreds of hours of great pop culture and geek programming that you will find over on our Patreon. Again, that's patreon.com/Secret Friends Unite. There's a link in the show notes, and it's entirely possible I might mention it again. But yeah, let's talk about Spider-Man. So The Amazing Spider-Man 2012. And Andy, I know your age because we've talked about it. Is this a movie you saw in the theaters? You were old enough by this point to...
Yes, I remember going to the theaters to see this.
Okay.
Was very excited, like, at first, and then I started thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, maybe that wasn't so great. But on this rewatch, I was pleasantly surprised, actually.
Oh my gosh. Well, we will get into it. Absolutely. Let me give you the kind of the nuts and bolts. This is a 2012 superhero film based on the Marvel Comics character Spider-Man, obviously. Directed by Mark Webb. So we have a new director, obviously. The Tobey Maguire films were directed by Sam Raimi. There were 3 films between 2002 and 2007. So this is now 5 years gone by since Spider-Man has been on the big screen. The movie was written by James Vanderbilt, Alvin Sargent, Steve Kloves from a story by Vanderbilt, and it rebooted the series with a new star. Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker, Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy. Not her first appearance on the big screen. Her first appearance on the big screen was in the Maguire third Spider-Man film, where she was played by the fantastic Dallas Bryce Howard, who I thought she was also a great Gwen Stacy. Reese Ifans, Dennis Leary. Big fan of Dennis Leary, a fellow Bostonite. I guess that's why I'm wearing my Boston t-shirt today, which you can't see on screen because we're recording audio, but I think I did it subliminally. Campbell Scott, Irfan Khan, Martin Sheen, and Sally Field. The plot follows teenage Peter Parker, Garfield, who gains spider-like abilities and fights crime as Spider-Man while also attempting to live an ordinary life. That is a very generic description of the film, but okay. Development began in 2010 following the cancellation of Spider-Man 4, which would have kept kept the Raimi series with Maguire going. Columbia opted to reboot the franchise with the same production team, with Vanderbilt staying on to write and Sergeant Cloves assisting with the script. See, I was right away trying to figure out, because I'm not familiar with those names, if these were all new people. But then we also really have to remember, if they were staying on board, they were probably involved in that third Maguire film, which was god awful, as I recall. So I think that might start tipping us in that direction. Using the RED Epic Camera Principal Photography occurred in Los Angeles and New York City between December 2010 and May of 2011. So again, a Spider-Man movie not filmed in its entirety in New York. No, thank you. Then again, they filmed everything in Atlanta, so is it really better? I don't think so. The movie appeared in June in overseas in Tokyo, and then on July 3rd here in the United States. Through Columbia, the film made $758 million worldwide, making it the seventh highest grossing film of 2012. That's crazy to think that it would make nearly $1 billion, more than $750 million, and be the seventh, which, living in a post-COVID world with the box office, those numbers are so much smaller. $1 billion films are very thin. What's that?
2012 was also the year of the first Avengers.
Right, exactly. Yeah, which was $1 billion film. Right. And this was obviously, not at all connected, because it's in a different continuity, different ownership. A sequel, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, was released in 2014. We will not be talking about that film because I don't think I could bring myself to watch it. That's how bad I really thought it was. From the numbers, this is surprising to me anyway, pulled a 71% on Rotten Tomatoes. That would be from 336 reviews from critics, and 77% audience score on the popcorn meter, which has over 250,000 ratings. I find that all of them are over 250,000 ratings, so you don't really know how. I feel like that number is maybe fudged. But the critic score and the audience score are pretty close, and I feel like we see less of that. So maybe there's something to it. I don't know. Well, anyway, since we're talking about a film from almost 15 years ago, we're going to go spoiler engage. So if you've not seen this film, please definitely give us a pause, go watch the film, and come back and pick us up from this point. So that was your pause. We're going to talk favorite moments, and then missed opportunities, weird plot holes, etc., and then score it 1 to 10, simply the same as we have already. So let's get into it. Andy, talk to me about some things that you enjoyed about this film.
Okay, straight up enjoyed. Let's start with Gwen. I like her. She's fun.
Agreed.
She might be a little different from comics Gwen Stacy or Spectacular Spider-Man Gwen Stacy, but I like her as sort of the science nerd, and her and Peter, they're very, very good together. So
right.
I like this relationship plotline a lot better than the previous one we talked about.
Right. And, the thing is, a lot people don't necessarily know, because Mary Jane is so very prevalent in the first trilogy and other things that followed, that Gwen was always Peter's true love. And when she died in ASM 121, and the poster for ASM 122 is behind me, that was the most really probably the second most devastating loss, behind that of obviously of Uncle Ben. Well, third, I guess his parents as well. But it was, but everybody tends to think of Mary Jane, because it's certainly in the age of older readers like myself, who grew up reading Spider-Man in the 80s, there hadn't been Gwen. Gwen, the character, was killed off in 1973. And then Mary Jane became the prevalent character. It was 1973 in our time, of course. And Mary Jane became the prevalent character. So, but yeah, Gwen was always his main love, the one that he would go to great lengths for and loved him unequivocally, where Mary Jane was just kind of a ditzy, manipulative. She dated Harry, but she was very manipulative and stuff. So I always preferred Gwen myself.
My introduction to Spider-Man, we've been through this, was the 90s animated show, where we see Gwen Stacy once, and it's an alternate universe situation. So that show is all about Mary Jane, and I love Mary Jane. But I think, with her coming back in the 2007 movie, she's part of the Spectacular Spider-Man. We have her here. And then I'm not sure exactly when Spider-Gwen became a thing, but I think
about 2014.
This point?
2014.
So yeah,
2014.
this
It
is
was the
when
it was
he was coming back
the
into
yeah.
the
It's when
Spider stories.
the Spider-Verse was a great comic book miniseries that launched. Spider-Man Noir was right around that same time, which is a show that's about to come on Amazon Prime, starring Nicolas Cage in the next few weeks. Looking forward to that. But Spider-Gwen was coined at that time. Miles Morales was a few years earlier than that. So Gwen, the character had a long vacation of being seen, though she came back as a clone and all this different stuff. So I loved a couple of different things just right off the bat. It was kind of fun, kind of in the opening post opening credits, the kind of the time slide. So Peter Parker is a little baby boy in about 1995 or so. I did the math because the film set in 2017. He's 17 in that film. So this was this was mid 90s. So he's walking around his parents' apartment and Friends is on the TV, which was great because you don't remember, but Friends was this unstoppable juggernaut in the 90s that people watched all over the world. I really like Campbell Scott and the actress's name. I had to look up her last name because I remembered her first name is Embeth Davidtz. She's British. Were Richard and Mary Parker. And I did say, however, her American accent leaves something to be desired. It's so funny to me, and maybe you have a different opinion about this being from overseas yourself, but I feel like Americans nail a British accent with a greater success rate than Brits nail an American accent. And I don't know why that is. But that just seems to be my expression because I think when people try to talk American and they're not, it's hard to get right. Some people really nail it, but then if you look at like an American doing Brit, think about like Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Never would have guessed. But then again, Jamie Bamber, who's a Brit, in Battlestar Galactica, people never knew. You know what I mean? Or, So I think the American accent one can be a little tricky sometimes, but maybe that's my ugly American showing, so I apologize. But there was a take that I had. What's something else you loved?
I just want to mention about Richard and Mary. We talked
Yes, please.
time about, you mentioning they need to add in something new for the different versions.
Right.
I think it's a very cool idea to explore his parents here.
Right.
Too bad we sort of dropped that because I have an idea where you could almost sort of cut down the runtime a little, don't deal so much with the lizard, and then have the story be about him losing Uncle Ben and going on his vendetta, but also digging into what happened to his parents. Like you could have focused on those two things instead.
As opposed to jamming it in the next film, which, as I recall, that's what they do. There's a big piece about, his dad had a hidden lab, and I think it was in a subway car. Like they went like really. The next film was absolutely god awful, and I did mention that. So I'm not bummed out that we're missing it. In a lot of ways, it kind of elevates the status of this film because if you compare the two, but they did do something unique because his parents were rich scientists, or his dad was. Where in the past, now we met Peter Parker's parents in flashbacks, and it was ASM. I think annual number 5, which was in about 1967, 1968, they were SHIELD agents, and they were killed on a mission. So they had absolutely nothing to do with being scientists, but it fit, and Kurt Connors didn't know them at all. So that part of it was all, this is in a lot of ways a completely new story. They took even the familiar elements, they really turned them on their head. And in some ways, I think that landed. And I think in some very obvious ways, it really did not. Like, for me, I love comedian Dennis Leary. Maybe it's because, a lot of his jokes are about, being an Irish American, of which I'm that myself, and being from Boston. My grandmother's from Boston. So I love him. He has a terrible Captain Stacy. No shade or appearance of what the character was actually like. Captain Stacy walked with a cane. He was injured in the line of duty. He was very kindly. He was smart. He figured out Peter Parker's identity on his own and only revealed it to Peter on his deathbed, because Captain Stacy died pushing a young kid out of the way of some falling rubble when Peter was fighting Dr. Octopus, I think in ASM 90. I recently read it because of my summer reading project where I'm reading all of the ASM issues from the 1970s. But I love Dennis Leary, so it didn't really bother me that they put him in this, because I thought he was still great in this movie.
Yeah, and I really like the moment where he calls, Spider-Man out on, he's going after all these similar-looking people. So this feels like it's personal. He's not just protecting them, and I liked that.
Right. He wasn't. I didn't. In retrospect, didn't mean to really denigrate to say he wasn't smart, because he really kind of was. So, I will say that their interpretation of the lizard is much scarier, and it's very cinematic than anything we ever see in the comics. Because if you look at the lizard as a character, it's introduced in ASM #6. So this was in 1962-63. He's just kind of stupid looking. He's a man-sized guy with a kind of a dumb head. He's not scary looking. He's stupid looking. He looks like not even like tiny Godzilla. Where in this, he's very monstrous, and he's big naked lizard guy, where the lizard was wearing a lab coat and purple pants, kind of like the Hulk does. You know what I mean? And it's not scary. Where this is like, shit, and he's like maybe 10 to 12 to 15 feet tall. So he's scary as hell. It is kind of cool how one point, when in kind of the third act, when he's getting ready to unleash his master plan, he's wearing a lab coat for a second. So I'm like, all right, well, that's a nice little callback. But I'll give them props on the lizard design, even though it's obviously entirely CGI. I think they really pull it off.
I did not like his face.
No. He was too human-y.
Big and scary, but I don't like the lizard face. Like, it's not lizardy enough, or it's like
that's
something
fair
about it that I don't like. I'm not.
No, yeah.
The thing is, Lizard is one of my favorite Spider-Man villains, I think, and I'm like, also big question: where's his family? Where's his family? We need
that
them.
Was a big
about the Lizard is that emotional component, and here he's just by himself. So where's the kid? Where's his son?
Yeah, I jumped right into that. Not that I want to jump into things I didn't like, but big plot holes. But the Stacy family was only George and Gwen, no siblings. His wife had died. He had a brother and a sister-in-law that lived over in England, which was a plot line that came out in the comics. Connors, you're right. He had a wife and a young son, and it was his. What kept him grounded was always trying to get back to them or make things right for them. And in this, he's just like, without the mustache, he's a mustache twirling villain. And that doesn't, there's a lot of this movie. If I was kind of to sum it up and encapsulate, there's a lot of this movie that doesn't land if you're a fan of the comics. But I think that one of the things, it's like to turn it on its ear. One of the things that makes these movies so successful is making them accessible to people that don't know anything about the comics or don't feel like they have to do a lot of homework. Because, if you look at the modern MCU, everything post Endgame has largely failed on the big screen because people are not going to go see something they have to do all this homework for watching TV shows, since Disney Plus said, we're going to do a bunch of TV shows about Marvel. And if people don't watch them, it's the reason why the Marvels from 2023 was pretty much one of their biggest failures, because it was all pretty much based around a television show that people didn't want to watch. You know what I mean? They just wanted to have a movie that's accessible like the Avengers and say, this is fun. I don't need to know a lot. I can pick up the small clues, and you're not giving me a lot of characters I don't know anything about. So yeah, I think that part of it makes sense here, that they're because they make a lot of changes. You know what I mean? They give us Peter, who is this shy, almost reclusive, doesn't really want to be friends with anybody, but Peter did want to be friends with people, but he was too much of a nerd. This guy's a nerd, but this guy is a hipster with a skateboard, and he takes pictures, which teenage Peter didn't do. He only did it because he started taking pictures to sell to J. Jonah Jameson. So his interest in photography doesn't track, because he didn't really have an interest in photography. He had an interest in making money, taking pictures of himself as Spider-Man. But they absolutely, kind of had to turn things on their heel, but not to get too far ahead of myself.
Yeah.
So
the thing is, when we're comparing just Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire,
right,
I like Andrew better. Mine is the skateboard. Like the skateboard, I don't like for Peter. That doesn't really fit his character. But I don't know. There's just something about Andrew Garfield which I think fits
because
my image of Peter Parker better.
And he's so hunky. And Peter was a very handsome guy, as illustrated. And I've always found Tobey Maguire a little off-putting with his kind of beady eyes, or Garfield is a super attractive guy. So you're right. And it's funny, while I kind of like Toby, between the two, I like him better as Spider-Man. It's kind of like comparing Bruce Wayne and Batman in the various incarnations. A lot of people like Ben Affleck as Bruce Wayne, but people tend to like Michael Keaton more as Batman because maybe he's a little bit more true to the alter ego, where I like Toby as Spider-Man, but I like Garfield as Peter Parker. I think I'm going to have to agree with you there.
But also just, it was another fun thing. But I didn't talk about it last time, but with the fashion and everything, the 2002 versus 2012. And just like everything, the clothes, the computers,
very
and
stylized.
all of that versus here, where it's very, like, he's very geek chic. And I like the Einstein shirt, for example. But it's fun.
Geek chic, I like that. They also really nailed the casting of Flash Thompson, which I don't think they did with Joe Manganiello in the first one. Because this Flash is he's a school bully, and he's picking on other kids instead of Peter, and then he turns around and picks on Peter, which makes sense. So as the whole lizard thing is going forward, I did kind of dig how Peter down in the sewers creates that big spider web that's going off through all these different pipes. And while he's waiting to see it ticked off, he's sitting there playing like Candy Crush or whatever on his phone, because it was really at this point in culture that the iPhone was starting to take off. Like, I think I got my first iPhone in probably 2010, 2011, and it had been around a couple of years since that point. But I love all the little lizards that he not only follows down into the subway, but that are the little cute little lizards. Like, he thinks the lizard is coming, and it's just a little guy walking along spiderweb. Doot, 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 doot. That was adorable. And obviously everything's CGI, but I thought that was pretty neat.
The big web down in the sewer, and also we get a lot of cool poses when he's web slinging and stuff. And I'm like, that's cool stuff.
I have some thoughts on that too. And while I'm not doing a great job, I'm trying to keep it positive in this first segment here. The high school fight, awesome. One of Stan Lee's best cameos, I know, because it was Stan Lee as the librarian.
Much.
And he doesn't hear what's the fight's happening behind him, and he's listening to music and flipping through a book or something. And he almost gets hit by a table, but Peter pulls it back at the right minute. So I think one of his best it's right up there with him with the Watchers in space and Guardians 2, which is, I think, his other great cameo, in my opinion. So
this one is fantastic. That's on my list of notes.
I enjoyed the end. This was after the big monster fight, which is just, it's paint by numbers. A big monster fight's going to always end up being the same. But it was very sweet and endearing. So it was, Captain Stacy dying in the line of duty, stay away from my daughter. Don't bring him into this. I know you have to be here or whatever. And then he breaks up with her. And it's heartfelt and the music swells and all this different stuff. They snuck in something here that people don't necessarily always know about, is that Flash in the 60s in Midtown High was the president of the Spider-Man fan club. And then they, in this, he's wearing a t-shirt and he's saying, yeah, man, he's awesome. The chicks dig him, which was not a thing. But again, it tied in with it very much being of the time. And when April and I were talking about our bad movie recently, which was The Fast and the Furious from 2001, anything of the time is going to reflect things that were popular at the time. And with a great script, they can integrate that without making it be like, oh God, this is so dated. But that seemed like a very dated reference. I also loved Emma Watson as Gwen Stacy, largely because she's so lovely. I mean, my God, and an incredible actress who's had a meteoric rise in Hollywood. So yeah, I did like some different things about changing around, like the burglar, and it was a stick up at a convenience store, and Uncle Ben was wrestling with the guy in the street, which is of course not what happened in the comic. Uncle Ben got shot at home because there was somebody breaking in, and then in the Toby movie he got shot in the street and the guy stole his car. So they got to keep moving the pieces around. I get it, but thank God, by the time we get to talking about Tom Holland, they realize that I'm very fond of saying every man, woman, and child, either alive or not yet born or dead, knows Spider-Man's origin. They know Superman's origin. They know Batman's origin. We don't need to see it again. So I feel like this movie clocked in at 2 hours and 16 minutes and easy to cut. I would say maybe a quarter of it, because I felt like it really dragged in that first half of the film. You know what I mean?
In that case, I say focus in. Either we take out some of the origin stuff and build up Kurt Connors and the family and focus on the Lisbon plot and make that emotional, or
absolutely
we
agreed.
could just focus in on basically that first Spider-Man story and have him hunt down Uncle Ben, have the talk with Captain Stacy where he's like, yeah, no, this guy is doing something very personal, and then have Peter realize what he's meant to do with his spider powers, and also build up the mystery with the parents and maybe get some more info there. And because that would be new. That would give Spider-Man fans something new, which would be interesting.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Treading over the same ground, even if I'm going to change A, B, and C, it's still the same thing. It's still the same result. It's still the, he didn't say with great power comes great responsibility, but he danced around it. And again, the cast of this is absolutely terrific. You have more Oscar and Emmy award-winning, actors and actresses than you can shake a web at, as Stan Lee was very fond of saying in letters columns. I mean, Sally Field, Martin Sheen, and future ones like Garfield and Emma Stone going on, but just too much, kind of all very samey. So, all right, let's move on to, and again, I know we've danced this line, but let's move on to like missed opportunities, stuff you didn't care for, weird plot holes, et cetera, et cetera. So I already danced around my first one, and so I called it the low-hanging fruit. Peter Parker as a hipster absolutely does not work for me. Hipster, geek chic, which is what you said, could tilt into it. He was almost like a little too awkward, because Peter Parker, as we meet the character, is just, I want to belong, I want to have friends, but I love science and shit, and everybody else is into records and going to the sock hop again. It was the early 60s. But he was just, it's like him chatting with Gwen in the hallway after the basketball scene, which was...
It's cute.
It is, but he's just like, I can't talk. I will tell you briefly, because I worked in optical. I was never an optician, but I sold eyeglasses, that one person does not put on another person's eyeglasses and they're able to see. He didn't have his dad's and took his contacts out, which is never referenced again, because Peter wore glasses. And when he got bit by the spider, because he has this increased metabolism, which helps him heal, his optic nerves healed to the point that he had 20/20 vision. So that was just a weird, like, annoying thing to me. Oscorp itself is the most not real place in the universe, like with its very wooden receptionist who's like, do you know where you need to be? She might as well have been Roberta, the robot that sits at the Baxter Building in the Fantastic Four. And then the propaganda video that plays, our company founded by our brilliant founder, Norman Osborn. It's not really a picture of him. Norman Osborn is Chris Cooper in the next film, but he is dying, so he doesn't really play a role.
But he was also not cast at this point, which is why we don't.
Right, because they have a shadow of some guy who is not Chris Cooper. But the subway sequence was just very much I Roll City. The guy put the beer bottle on Peter's head. He, sticks to a girl's shirt and then rips her off. So, here's a girl in her bra. The fight scene was awkward and it was just like, I don't know. All right, you say something. I'm on a soapbox, so I'm gonna step down.
Yeah, no, my big thing is about the lizard, because I'm not a fan of that design. Like, I don't like his face. I don't want to look at it. But also, there's the whole emotional angle that you usually get with the lizard that is not here because of the big question of where's his family.
Right.
But also the fact that he just like goes crazy and is going to turn everybody else into lizards. I'm like, why?
Exactly.
Come on, dude. Like, no.
It's not at all like the character, because the lizard, and I feel like they did lift that. But again, we're talking about a character that's been around for 60 years. So they're going to take some liberties with the stuff he's done. Like, I'm sure, and because I know I've read it, but I've read a million billion comics in my lifetime, so I don't remember the plot line of every one. I'm sure something like that was something the lizard wanted to do at one point. Like, I'm going to turn everybody into lizards so I can cure everyone. But I think he just wanted to turn everybody into lizards so that he could rule them, like, that kind of thing. But he wasn't like, this
I think
attachment
there's an episode of the 90s show where some kind of lizard thing got in the sewers. So you have they were actual normal lizards who evolved into like human-ish lizards, and they want him to be their leader. And they're like, we're gonna turn more people into people like us, and then we're going to take over. And Kurt had to stop him. I think that's an episode of the 90s show.
Right. Did you just say Kirk had to stop him?
Kurt.
How did he get there? Kurt, not Kirk. Okay. I think it'd be a great crossover. I was chucking Ben's line when he's saying that Ben, when he's talking to Peter, this is just an aside, and they're in the hallway after the basketball thing. He says, and Gwen's standing nearby, he's like, "Hey, he's got you on his computer. I'm his probation officer." That was pretty good. I'll give them that. But yeah, I'm with you. The slow mo and the POV shots when Peter's swinging, I hate that shit. That really, it's so played out that it just totally drives me nuts. And again, it's a more raw nerve for me because I'm such a Spider-Man guy. But it's like that's people are supposed to look at that and ooh and ah, and maybe for the rubes that's good enough. But I guess for me, it's just not landing.
Like some of the cool poses and stuff, like the POV shots. Some of them are cool, some of them are not that great. But also,
right,
like him swinging around and just I think that's fun. I like those poses, and
that's fair. I do when the crane shot thing that helps Spider-Man get across town to fight the lizard in the big third act. You have C. Thomas Howell, who's a great actor, who we saw earlier in the film because Spider-Man ended up rescuing his kid from a burning car that fell into the East River.
We haven't talked about that, but I love that sequence. I love
that. I agree.
That is so good. And like him giving him the mask and being like, "Put it on. You're going to be strong."
Yeah.
So good.
You're right. That landed, and I didn't bother to bring it up. But it's always super obvious when actors who are generally in LA, which is where they film this, are trying to be New York and talk New York, and they were like, "Get those guys on the crane because they're gonna earn their overtime." And I'm like, just fucking stop, Jesus, it's like the bad American accent from a British actor. It's like I can hear it. It sucks. Just don't.
Not being American, that didn't really bug me. But also, one thing I appreciated about that is the whole relationship between Spider-Man and New York. Like, you can take basically
which was mostly filmed in LA
superhero and put them somewhere in the US, and it makes sense. But you can't take Spidey out of New York. You just can't.
Right. Well, it's like Daredevil. It's kind of the same thing, and only very rarely, and I'm not a big Daredevil fan of the comics anyway. I love the shows, but there have been a few times when they pulled Daredevil out and he's lived in another city or he's gone to another country. And it's just like, no, Daredevil, Hell's Kitchen.
Sort of fit in Boston.
Yeah.
If you wanted him to.
Right. The same kind of thing in a gritty urban environment. Spider-Man's the same. It's just, they're two sides of a different coin. You know what I mean? The Punisher would fit anywhere because he can go blow up villains anywhere. But yeah, Spider-Man, you're right. He, New York is a character in any Spider-Man saga. So, all right. Well, let's wrap this up and give this a rating. I'll go first. Unsurprisingly, this is like a 5 out of 10 for me. It was a great cast. I've talked about that, but a great cast doesn't overcome a shitty script, a bad adaptation. I will acknowledge, and this is where I gave them some points, that I know that they have to change things around. They can't just make a photocopy of the Tobey movies because nobody would want to go see it, or maybe they would, but it would be that much more thin. But all of the characterizations, all the stuff you and I have been talking about here, Peter, his parents, Aunt May, Captain Stacy, Gwen, Kurt Connors, they range from a little bit off to just all the way off. Peter is also really arrogant, and even and that is just, it doesn't fit. He gets a little boastful of his own powers and stuff, but he just seems super arrogant in this. He's too much of a damn teenager. The costume, which we haven't talked about, is terrible. And I did read at the time, like, hey, we had to give him something different looking so that people, we don't trust our viewers to not understand this is not Spider-Man 4 with Tobey Maguire. It's like, they're going to figure it out. You don't have to give him a shitty costume, which is what they did. Because it's a luge. It's like a luge person, someone who does a luge athlete, and then like some weird mask, and then his eyelets are just Ray-Ban sunglasses. So it's, and then the web shooters you see him doing it because he's having this whole sequence. He cannibalizes 2 watch faces to make his web shoot. It's too homemade. It's really cruddy. there are challenges without a doubt in updating a story from the 1960s to a 21st century audience. There's no doubt. But this is kind of a bridge too far. They threw out the baby with the bathwater, tried to introduce things that don't work for what those of us who know about the character, even going back to your stage, which having been born out of watching the animated series. If you compare this to that 90s animated series, there's things that don't add up.
Yes,
yeah.
The big one being the lizard.
Yeah, without a doubt. So, like I think I mentioned this before, but the only real bright spot is that the sequel, which came out 2 years later, was so much worse. That does it? Is it the rising tide lifts all boats? I guess. I don't know. So, what about you? Where do you land with this?
I didn't expect this, but I'm thinking of giving this a 7.5, just like the last movie.
Okay.
Coming from slightly different angles, because there are more things that I want to critique in this movie, I think, but I just genuinely kind of like it. I was surprised, like I said, how much I sort of was like, yeah, you know what? I had a good time watching this. And the 2002 movie, I was like, you know what? I'm feeling generous. You're not doing anything egregious, so you're going to get a 7.5. So, you know what? There's slightly different angles for that same score, but I think that's fair.
Yeah, that's all right. I appreciate you having an opinion that's different from mine, and I appreciate you tolerating my piling on. So that's awesome. Couple of fun facts: during the breaks, Andy Garfield went around New York playing basketball with kids in his Spider-Man outfit. Obviously, when they were in New York, since a lot of this. So a big switch between this film and the previous one is that Spider-Man does actually have web shooters as opposed to it being organic, which I know that you were not a fan of in the previous film because we talked about that last week. Inspired from the comics, where he has similar devices. And then different variations of the comic, the organic webbing became a thing. Director Mark Webb explained that the web shooters were a creative decision to showcase Peter's intellect, which is funny because those were, but the web fluid itself, which in the comics Peter invented, came from Oscorp, which I also think I made a note and forgot to say it. Wherever he got the money for this must be, I'm figuring Uncle Ben had a massive life insurance policy. Because how else did he get money to build anything? You know what I mean? Because he didn't have a job. He wasn't even selling pictures of Spider-Man to J. Jonah Jameson because he wasn't Spider-Man yet. So Webb said, we wanted to emphasize that things that these are things that Peter made and that he is special himself, even though he feels like an outsider. So Ben Parker's line, "With great power comes great responsibility," prominent in the Raimi movies, is not said in this film. The voicemail by Ben alludes to this, but never directly quotes it. I think that's a good choice. This is more in keeping with Amazing Fantasy 15. That's what I pegged. The first telling of the story, where there's merely a text box that says, "With great power, there must come great responsibility," which means that nobody said it. Subsequent retelling of the story in flashback in the reboot give the world the most famous line. So it's kind of one of those, what is that expression where you hear something often enough and then you just assume that it's a fact, even though it's just somebody's opinion. You know what I'm talking about. I can't think of it either. But let's see. Yeah, the hallway fight was entirely CGI. So Peter too? That's interesting. With this film, the Spider-Man franchise broke $3 billion at the box office. Awesome. Gwen Stacy's Emma Stone's apartment is number 2016. This is the year Andrew Garfield Spider-Man was replaced by Tom Holland as Spider-Man in Captain America: Civil War. Aww. They knew the whole time. Well, cool. Any final thoughts before we send it into oblivion?
Well, it's a different Spidey. Like we talked about with 2002, that's maybe as close as you're going to get to those 60s comics in this century.
Yeah.
And this is not just because it's 10 years later, but it's also pulling on more of the ultimate, I think, just aesthetically and just like what we want to do with Spider-Man.
Right.
So,
right.
And again, we talked about how good Uncle Ben and Aunt May were in the 2002 movie. And then you have Martin Sheen as Uncle Ben here, again, like absolutely perfect casting. And Sally Field
Right.
too. She's a very sweet Aunt May, even though we don't get too much of her.
Right. Yeah. Very limited. Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool. All right. Well, the summer of Spider-Man rages on, and we will be back. Andy is unfortunately missing the next episode because we have to record it for Memorial Day, and because of the time difference, we have to record it during the week. So Andy will be back, not for Spider-Man Homecoming, but for Spider-Man Far From Home, I think, because we're going to cover Homecoming, Far From Home, and then No Way Home before we get to Brand New Day, amongst the other offerings that we do here on this show. But Andy, thanks for being here, of course. Where do people find you out there on social media if they want to talk Spider-Man with you?
I'm on BlueSky at Andy94. That's where you'll find me. And I also post about my musical theater podcast. Well, movie musical podcast.
Excellent. Good deal. And they can find it there. Awesome. And you can find me and Secret Friends Unite on all the big socials, with the exception of X and TikTok for the most point. Secret Friends Unite is simply Secret Friends Unite. And you can find me as the C3. That's TheCeeThree. I'm also working on being a bit more consistent with my kitchen chats. I was doing them in my dining room for a while, but I think I'm going to move back to the kitchen because kitchen chat kind of rolls a little bit more off the tongue. But though in 3 minutes or less, I just tell you about stuff that I'm enjoying. You can also, if you're listening to us in Michigan, listening to this when it comes out, myself, Kurt, who's a contributor of mine, and my co-host Peter will be on Saturday at Motor City Comic Con in Metro Detroit, where there's going to be great guests like Spider-Man artist Mark Bagley, in addition to actors like Charlie Cox, our beloved Daredevil. So please come out and see us. And if you see us, chat us up, because we love meeting people in the field. We'd love to see you out there. But with that, friends, as always, thank you for joining us. I'm going to tell you that sharing is caring, and to keep on trucking.
This podcast is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and podcast services around the galaxy, as well as video on our YouTube channel. You can support Secret Friends Unite by becoming a Patreon member, get bonus programs and more over at patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. Join our Discord community for even more discussions on all things geek. For all the latest updates on Secret Friends Unite, make sure to follow us on Threads at secret.friends.unite and visit secretfriendsunite.com. Find our merchandise at TeePublic and Redbubble. Thanks for listening, and may the Force live long and prosper.